is our pledge of allegiance. Our firefighter John Thompson will lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sort of business citizen comments. This is an opportunity for citizens to address the council on agenda items or other items they wish to bring to the attention of the council. Citizens are encouraged to discuss operational issues and events with the mayor. In consideration of others wishing to speak, please limit your remarks to 3 minutes. Do we have any citizen comments today? No. We'll move on to discussion items. Roman number 4, item A, collective labor agreement with the International Association of Firefighters, local number 1773. Review and discussion about the current collective labor agreement between the City of Lewiston and the International Association of Firefighters, local number 1773, which agreement expires on September 30th, 2024. And we have Director Province here, who I hope is going to continue to lead us through this discussion. We made about halfway through last time, so we'll pick up where we left off.
Do you guys want me to do it like last time, so at the table? Okay.
Yeah.
No, Rich again.
And this is just kind of a free format, so don't worry about going to the chair and ask your questions. And I think we should remember that we have to speak up loudly and clearly so those listening at home online can hear what we have to say. Would you like to bring some folks to the podium?
Yeah, I think Richie and Tim are coming.
Do you want to switch spots? I'll take the hot seat.
Tim, do you want to come down here?
Sure.
Want to come sit by me?
I was telling Nikki that I forgot about being on camera.
You're on YouTube.
Oh boy.
Okay, so I think we left with Article 15. Am I remembering that correctly? Yeah.
Yeah.
So Article 15 on overtime. Did you guys have any questions about this? Section 1 is threshold. And so 24 of the 26 pay periods, fire is paid threshold pay. And that has to do really with the hours of work. And then Council Spickermeyer, you had a question about overtime. Section 2 addresses overtime. Wasn't sure.
But does it, who authorizes it? That was the question.
Yeah, it says authorized overtime. I'm assuming like a superior, so like battalion chief, fire chief.
Or just designate.
Yeah, or his designee, yeah.
But it's not, it doesn't describe that anywhere in the contract.
Correct.
Okay, yeah.
And so a lot of times in the contract, we have, and Richie or Captain Chief Lucas can, I gotta move up the ranks as Richie moved up the ranks. It defines it in clarifying documents in our SOPs. So if you go to, somewhere in here, it says overtime will be distributed in a fair and equitable way.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really say how. That's defined and give the chief latitude to be able to define that as the operations dictate. Does that make sense?
I was kind of surprised that usually in union contracts, you'd see it in management right, but.
Yeah, and in the management rights, it says they have the right to be able to dictate hours as necessary, way back when. So really, all that's buttoned up within their right, and the only right that we have is that the overtime will be distributed.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So how do we, if it's multiple people approving overtime, how are we ensuring that you're staying within budget?
So we have our overtime budget, but the designee would be the battalion chief for the day. So that's usually the point of contact that makes the authorization. And before that, we try to fill it with the reserve firefighter, so at the lowest cost. But sometimes we have to take into effect their hours work, because they only work so many hours consecutively, and it comes into their health and safety, and then how many we have. So currently we have to put on another group of candidates to replenish that, because we've been hiring people, so we deplete the reserve staff. And then, yes, the point of contact would be, or the person that would make that decision daily is the battalion chief. And if he has any questions, then he would call me and ask. But usually that's their job. They're very good at it. And it's not that complicated of a process really as far as budgeting, we have that's budgeted every year, our overtime budget, so.
I think if I could add that, we staff 16 a day, and that's our minimum and our maximum. And so really that staffing dictates, so if we go below 16, we have to hire somebody back. We always try to hire a reserve first, but the way things have been in the last few years, it's been harder and harder to find people who will work, quite honestly. And then that goes back to, if we can't get a reserve, then we have to hire it through overtime, through one of our full-time personnel. And there's times where we force our or our full-time personnel to work. So they'll have worked all day and all night, 8 a.m. to 8 a.m. the next day. And then when it's time to go home, we say, we can't find anybody to work. We have to cover this ambulance. We have staffing needs. You have to stay.
It's sometimes, just to add, sorry, keep going this way, we should have sat on that end together. It's specialty, so sometimes we need a paramedic in a spot because it's required for ALS ambulance. Or a person has certain requirements, like our reserve firefighters don't necessarily drive our fire engines. They haven't been trained to that level yet. Don't have enough years of experience yet. So sometimes that comes into account when you're trying to fill that overtime as well.
Yeah. So really, I would say probably, and I hope Chief Lucas agrees, that really the staffing is what dictates the overtime. There very rarely do we have anybody who is on special projects or anything that would receive overtime. And there are a few out there, but the bulk of the overtime hours is filling those 16 positions that we have on every day. So if there's a paramedic missing off of Medic 1 downtown, we try to move people up to fill that position, and then at the very bottom we try to move a reserve firefighter into that position. But if there are no reserve firefighters who are willing to work, we have to have that staffed with somebody. So we offer it out to full-time personnel, and if we can't find any full-time personnel, then we force an overtime position. We mandatory someone to do that under threat of discipline.
So by having, if I'm understanding this correctly, having it in the contract, like, I'm just throwing a low number out, but like no more than 40 hours of overtime, that would make it difficult for you guys to be able to work around these sometimes extenuating circumstances.
And I don't want to speak for the chief, but yeah, and not only would it make it difficult to work around, but if we would start having to shut down rigs, and then if somebody has a heart attack in downtown Lewiston, they may be getting an ambulance from out in the East Orchards, and it takes an extra 2 to 4 minutes, which that means life or death. So that's what we're trying to not accomplish, or trying to get around, is to not shut down vehicles that are essential to the emergency services in the area. And that's the 16 number.
Okay.
So I have a catch-up question from last time. What designates a 40-hour employee?
That's gonna be like your Monday through Friday. That's your inspectors. So specific to fire, that's gonna be your fire inspectors. They work a Monday through Friday shift. So they're working at 8 hours a day, versus the other fire personnel are working. So like Richie would be a 40-hour personnel because he's working Monday through Friday.
So in this, always mentions 40 hours, does that include admin or not? Is that a separate?
No, admin are not under the contract.
Yeah, the contract covers 2 40-hour personnel, and are the inspectors.
Yeah. Whereas the other fire members are working 24-hour shifts. Any other questions on overtime? Next section is comp time, so that's basically overtime that's banked instead of paid out, that they can use for leave at another time. And then we have callback. So this would be if an employee was subject to callback in an emergency. Holdover, that's pretty specific. Any other questions in Article 15?
I did kind of a follow-up on the 40-hour. So can a 40-hour employee an inspector, just for, I don't have a better term, work down, could they man a,
Work suppression, you mean? Work as a fireman?
yeah,
No. No, they work for the prevention chief, and they do the inspections, the building permits. Same, we'll get to it, but without area transfers, they can't take out area transfer. They're not medically trained personnel per se. We train them on CPR, first aid type stuff, just because they're around general public, but.
And then do you guys have any questions on Article 16, clothing? They do get a clothing allowance. Article 17, travel.
I did have to
Okay.
go back, sorry.
That's fine.
I'm catching up in my notes. So on 16, it mentions in there that the clothing allowance would be included in the holiday paycheck. What's that?
So they get paid out for their holidays once a year in October. And so their clothing allowance is included with that holiday payout check. That's, that one holiday that they get per month, they get paid out one time a year. So clothing
Okay.
allowance is included with that.
And then in the allowance in here, it had $500 for part-time. So once you sign up, you are considered a part-time no matter how much you work?
No, reserve are considered part-time. So our reserve firefighters, they work part-time. And sometimes part-time means quite a few hours, and sometimes that means, maybe 1 hour or one shift a month. So, but your full-time are gonna be your full-time employed firefighters, engineers, captains, and
Probably need to get away from the part-time
Part-time,
moniker, because
yeah.
it's really the reserve firefighter, so they're not working a set schedule.
Yeah.
And they're really at the beck and call of the needs of the department.
yeah.
And so we don't guarantee them hours, but there are enough hours to go around that you can probably work darn near full-time if you're available to work full-time. I know there's some reserve firefighters that enjoy
So there wouldn't be an
Yeah.
instance where you were signed up as one and you never worked?
There are times, it's
Yeah.
kind of up to the employee. Again, there's plenty of work. I can tell you right now that none of our members, I don't want to speak for my members, but we all work, a moderate amount of overtime because that's what we need to do. It's so we can fill the needs of the city and respond to calls. But when it comes to a Saturday and it's your son's birthday and you're supposed to get off work and they say, hey, we can't find any reserves to work, you're holding over. Sorry, you have to. We want our reserves to be able to work, but there are some reserves that will sign up and then just work kind of a shift or two here and there because they have other employment. Then there are the reserves who this is their job and they want a full-time job and they want to come into our department and they work as much as possible. So
And there is a minimum amount.
Yeah, there's some
the reservists have
requirements.
to work, I think
They're
it's
required,
36 shifts
It's
a year.
36 a year.
Yeah.
It's actually one per month, but they're, for training purposes, 36 total. So it comes out to three a month they have to work. And also there's certification requirements and ongoing education stuff that they have to do to be able to be employed with us. So, but yeah, we have, like Tim was saying, we have some that work all the time, and it's such a different time now because at one point we had so many reserves because so many more people wanted to work for us that we'd have to spread the spots out that were vacant. Now we have guys that definitely, that's why we have to put protection in for them for hours worked. So they can't work more than 72 in a row. And so after 72, they have to take a mandatory 12 off. Because you have guys that will just stay there. So you have to keep check on them like, hey.
and there really are a handful of those really dedicated reserves. And then there are the reserves that I work a little bit, and then there's the reserves that come on and they have worked here and there, and maybe it's not for them, and they tend to go down the road pretty quick.
And those guys also have other jobs.
Yeah.
They work multiple jobs. So because it's not guaranteed full time, for them to get health insurance, for example, they need to work at least 1,560 hours a year as a reserve, then they're allowed health insurance. So
What about the reserves that have worked for us leave and come back as a reserve?
Yeah, I mean, we have had, I would say a fair amount of turnover now in our department where we hadn't seen a lot of turnover before. We've had 4 or 5.
of that,
4. Yeah,
Yeah, we've
four,
they're all
and then,
lifeline.
3 of them, they went to Life Flight to work, 'cause it's a pretty good wage up there. And they work part-time for us to fill the needs, and we see they're working a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah, they're working some. They honestly they came back to feel that because they live in this community and they have skill and knowledge, and they want. That's what most of them when they come into office they want something to offer back, and so they work when they can. They work around their life flight schedule.
The reserve program ideology has changed a little bit from when Richie and I were reserves.
Yeah.
We wanted jobs. You know, we wanted to be Lewiston firefighters. And so we came in and we worked as much as we could and tried to prove ourselves and it was there for the city and to get full-time jobs. Now we're in a hiring area where it's hard to hire people and people aren't wanting to work like they used to. And they just want to be a fireman, firefighter part-time. And so we're not seeing as many of those people who are as hungry as maybe we were when we were younger. And I think that's been a detriment to the program.
You're offering part-time employment. You have to compensate. You have to fill that gap with something else. So sometimes they choose to do that. So.
Any other questions?
Here I see when employee uniform becomes damaged or contaminated beyond serviceable use while on duty with approval of the fire chief. So I'm assuming that the fire chief, depending on the damage, not that often do I think that the firemen have their stuff being damaged by negligence, but
Yeah.
is that kind of where that comes into play? So they kind of
Yeah, and a
determine.
lot of it is, well, we go on medical calls, and so there's blood
Right,
contaminants
yeah.
that happen, and if you can't service that, very rarely have I seen somebody have something replaced. It has to be a pretty extended circumstance, and that's usually at the discretion of the chief.
Thank you.
Okay, Article 17, travel. Article 18, time trades. So this just allows an employee to do a time trade with another employee. Article 19, employee medical coverage and insurance program. This is, the firefighters are on the City of Lewiston Employee Health Benefit Trust.
Nikki, why don't you go back to time trades and just cover about overtime and or not,
Talk about overtime or not?
on time trades, how that works.
Yeah, so basically how it works is if I were to trade shifts with Tim, so Tim comes and works for me,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
I get paid, right? Correct?
Nope.
Oh, you get paid.
Nobody gets, well,
No.
you just paid like you're there. It's.
I get paid, but then I
Yeah.
owe you a shift.
Right, so it's very specific to firefighter employees
Yes.
under the FLSA,
Yes.
it's all listed in there. But if I am a paramedic in the fire department and I want a day off and I don't have any vacation time, I can ask another paramedic to work in my place and then I work their shift. And so
It
really,
becomes
as far
a
as
wash.
payroll,
Yeah.
and overtime and all that, it's all straight across. So, and there are some rules. They can't create overtime. They can't create a burden on the department. If I'm a paramedic and Ross in that room is not a paramedic, if I'm working in an ambulance where I'm supposed to be the paramedic, I can't trade with him because it needs a paramedic on that ambulance, so it can't get in the way of scheduling. And so it has to be at the privilege of the department, make sure the department operations continue like they're supposed to. So.
Interesting. Yeah, it's specific to the fire collective bargaining, we don't have that other. Does that answer, Mayor? What you were- Okay. Employee medical coverage, any questions there?
So I see on the group life, employer agrees to provide group life insurance in the amount of $20,000 within the indemnity clause for accidental death of $40,000 for each covered employee. So if employee dies and then their family member gets $40,000.
They're the beneficiary. So it depends on how they pass away, basically. You have $20,000 life, so if they pass away, you got $20,000. If it's accident, if they die due to accident, or they have a dismemberment, then there's an additional $20,000 that they receive.
And that's like if they died on the job?
No,
Okay.
no.
I was like, that seems quite low.
That's a whole nother, that's a workers' comp situation.
That's a different one,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, so there's different laws related to if you were to pass away on the job.
Okay, and then can they, opt in for more amount?
They can, there's voluntary amounts.
Okay,
So this is the amount that the city pays for every employee.
your minimum, yeah.
Yeah, and we pay for reservists, life insurance as well as part of the contract.
Okay,
So all benefit eligible employees receive that coverage. And then we provide additional optional coverage that the employee can purchase for additional coverage.
okay,
Yeah, we actually offer two.
awesome, thank you.
So we cover their medical benefits the same as we do any other employee. We cover the employee at 100% and dependents at 80%. So that's same with any other employee.
Section 4 agreement to reopen, have we ever had to do that?
Not in my time here.
No, there was 10 years ago, it was, I don't know, it was before me, that there were some times that it was getting close and we were worried that maybe the medical fund wasn't gonna remain solvent, but boy, in the last 10 years, it's been fantastic.
Yeah, and since that time, we've had to fall under the Department of Insurance and there's bigger fiduciary focus, so. And we have the Medical Benefits Advisory Committee that we ask them to participate on. And that's so that they stay informed and they can provide us some feedback on their health insurance. So if there ever were a time that we were approaching that 10%, there'd be conversations happening through the Medical Benefits Advisory Committee. And then the reserve firefighters become medically eligible for medical insurance after they've worked a look-back period of 1560, and that's just in accordance with the Affordable Care Act. We do offer a post-retirement insurance. That's something we coordinated with the fire department on, so they'd be eligible after 15 years of service to the city. And then, of course, we follow COBRA law, so we would offer COBRA insurance upon resignation or separation.
So the post-retirement insurance is separate but similar to COBRA, or how does that work?
Yeah, the difference really is COBRA offers you up to 18 months unless there's a qualifying event that allows you to have longer. The post-retirement is up to age 65 when you become eligible for Medicare. So public safety employees have the ability to retire sooner than they have a rule of 80, so they have the ability to retire sooner. This would offer them a longer amount of insurance coverage.
And is that associated with MERP?
MERP would be a separate entity that would provide them a medical reimbursement. So they could have probably monthly premium reimbursements.
Yeah, this came out of a past negotiation where we are able to become part of the International Association of Firefighters Healthcare Trust, which is a little bit bigger pool, a little bit bigger amount of money, so it's a little bit cheaper for our employees. But one of the big motivators for us to go to that trust was that there was a bridge gap between when our members retire at 53, 55, 56, and then the Medicare age is 65. Healthcare costs were getting so expensive, as everybody knows, that our guys were having to stay longer to maintain healthcare benefits. So what we were really looking for was something that we could get onto for 5 to 10 years to bridge that gap, and this is where that came in, and it was part of the negotiation process to help us stay within our trust. So that's kind of the idea behind it. MERP is a way to help us pay the 102% of the costs. So the cost in this, I'm gonna shoot like $1,200 a month for an individual.
Well, for one individual, it's like $815
Okay.
per month, and so MERP would allow you to get that reimbursed monthly.
To help us pay for that. So there's this unfortunate gap that is causing a lot of firefighters to work older and older, and we don't really want 62-year-old firefighters crawling around on floors in fires.
So yeah, we were able to create a retirement plan under our trust. It's currently the same coverage as an active member, but they pay that 100% plus 2% administrative fee. So, any other questions on that Article 19? Okay, 20 vacancies and promotions.
Section 3, what does the ICS stand for?
Incident
Yeah,
command.
incident command system.
So there's from 1 to 800 level of just teaching about incident command structure, and so it's just a requirement of battalion chiefs and chief officers.
And then is that 300 just a certain certification, or is it like hours, or?
It's a level.
It's a
Oh,
level,
it's a
it's
level.
a certification, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Just a question.
So in the case of an emergency, they set up an incident command. You have your commander and then responsibilities go down, so
And training
there's
on that
different
system.
levels, yeah.
And then for promotional reasons, they want you to meet that level.
Yeah, because as you, if an incident were to expand, you have different parts of that system that start to expand themselves. And on a day-to-day basis, we have lower level incidences that we don't need to enact all those branches of that system, so yeah, but if you ever were in the seat, you'd wanna have taken those classes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect, thank you.
Any other questions in this section? No? Article 21, personnel reduction. This just outlines the progression. Article 22, subpoena leave. These next couple are pretty. Article 23, jury duty. Article 24, negotiation for renewal. Any questions? There. Article 25, working in a higher classification. So an employee can receive like an out-of-class pay if they're an acting, captain or battalion chief. Did you have a question?
I was trying to understand it, I was just,
Working in a higher classification?
so, like temporarily, or once
Yeah.
they're,
Yeah.
Yeah, so if, say, battalion chief takes vacation,
oh, okay.
we move the next senior captain into that person's position. And to make sure they have the training and everything that they need, we pay them the price of that position, so they move up and get the pay for that position.
Okay, and then when they go back, or that
They
person
go
goes
back
back,
to-
it just
yeah,
goes back
they
to
go
the
back.
school.
Yeah, because you could have someone on a medical leave or somebody out on an extended vacation or if you have a vacancy or disciplinary situation, so that might provide an opportunity for someone to work in that higher class temporarily.
How did we get to 18% if they're a two-step?
Well, it's so between grades from firefighter to engineer is what we call a driver operator who operates the fire trucks. And then the captain who oversees and the battalion chief. Between all those steps is 9%. And so if you were to go 2 steps, that would be 18%. Very rarely do we see anybody going 2 steps. I don't know if anybody has ever, in my time.
Unless they're internal, unless they're like
Right.
hot flash or those kind of guys.
It's just weird to see it. I figured it was that, but it was like, if you stated that you're gonna pay them whatever they're working, then
And so it's
Just
probably
as it
leftover
could
language
happen.
from when we last negotiated.
Yeah,
Because the steps in the lanes were all kind of weird. Some were 3.2%, some were 2.9%, and so we tried to even that all out. And so the language then was, if you're going to move into the next step, it was just going to be 9%. And so that language is probably just some leftover language.
gotcha.
yeah, the last couple of pay scales, we've been trying to make them more like copacetic and easy instead of having wonky different percentages. So it's just 3% per step and then 9 per grade. A little bit easier to understand. Any other questions about that? Article 26, seniority. Article 27, miscellaneous. Tuition reimbursement,
Yeah,
personnel
okay.
files, and
Yep.
long-term disability.
Tuition reimbursement is pretty minimal. Is there
It's-
anything for that, or is there just nothing?
Yeah, tuition reimbursement right now is, you get $1,000 towards your tuition every fiscal year, but they have to apply for it. They have to get a grade C or above, and it has to be connected. We have an admin policy specific to, or actually I think it's in our personnel policy now.
The city
We might have
policy.
to, but yeah, it would provide them a reimbursement for some tuition.
And so in the contract, you'll see very rarely, but at times they'll say refer to city policy.
Mhm.
Because the way the state code is written, that you have to negotiate with firefighters for wages, benefits, working conditions, and all conditions of work. If the HR manager wanted to change the city policy, then you would have to notify the fire department, sit down for a meet and confer session every single time. And so that's why we don't follow the city policy, that's why we have a contract. But we have agreed in advance that, you know, for things like tuition reimbursement, whatever your change is, that we'll go ahead and agree to. But things that are more important, we try to spell out in the contract.
Thank you.
Any other questions on that? Fire department does have their own long-term disability plan, specific to their department, and we just act as a payroll deduction for them. So that's specific to those employees. Article 28, joint safety program, any questions?
I have some questions.
Sure,
Who's on it?
might be more to you.
Right now, I just got told I went to my first meeting.
Well,
It's me and Chief Weisenfels, and then we got several other union members.
yeah, I believe Captain Bobek.
Bobek.
I sit in on it every once in a while.
So who are
The
the
city risk manager.
two appointed by the city?
I'm sorry,
That's myself and Chief Weisenfels.
and the risk manager, correct?
Yeah, it's
And Gene
Gino, Gene's on
Harrington,
it,
yeah,
yeah.
Gene's the one, yeah.
So this group meets regularly or as needed due to an injury or accident?
We'll review and go over maybe possible safety procedures or lookouts, and they do inspections of the stations to look for anything that may be potential for safety hazard.
I want to say it's
They do?
quarterly, is that correct?
Yeah,
Quarterly, they meet
Do
quarterly.
those reports, are they somewhere?
yeah,
The facilities?
yep.
That'd be
And I know
interesting to read.
there's meeting notes that
Mm-hmm.
we can,
Yeah, we mentioned whatever.
That's all.
All right, Article 29, continuation of work. Pretty self-explanatory there.
Oh, I'm behind. I was like, what?
Article 30 is out-of-area ambulance transfer. Is there any questions about what an out-of-area ambulance transfer is?
I was just wondering what that, what is an ambulance transfer like?
So if we have a patient in the valley that needs something from outside the valley, outside of our normal response area, then we will hire a crew. If it's emergent, we'll hire a crew to take the patient from here to Spokane. And it used to be way more frequent. I mean, we'd go on, we kept a running list, and we still do, but it doesn't get checked off as much of who's on the bubble, who's going on duty. So then you would send an on-duty guy and then backfill that person. We have a system now, it's a separate system we put out and fill those for the hospitals in the valley. Things like life flight and getting a cath lab in the valley sure changed and reduced those. So
trying to see different though. It used to be very much cardiac issues.
yeah, that's
Where, because we didn't have a cath lab and we didn't have a cardiologist, and we'd have to rush them up to Spokane to take care of that. Now we're seeing weird things like urologists. We don't have urologists in the area.
So they did an appendectomy, they
Yeah,
take it out of
general
the
surgery.
doctors.
Where,
That's nationwide.
yeah.
Problem.
And so when one of our citizens needs that, we try to get them to where they need to go.
So I'm assuming we get reimbursed or paid by hospital, or is it billed to the patient?
Patient.
Yeah, and there's a pretty lengthy, if it's an emergent, we should take them. If Lifeline says they're not busy, or if a lot of times when the weather's not, good, they can't fly, we take them if it's emergent. If it's not emergent, there's a process that goes through our ambulance billing that they take a look and make sure that it'll be covered under insurance, and so we're not seeing losses.
Is that out of area include like Genesee and kind of those rural area towns, or those not as far?
It can, it just depends. I mean, we do cover a lot of the fringes of those areas, so especially on highway calls, but it just depends. Sometimes if it's from facility back to their home, but usually those areas, if there's an out of area going somewhere, Moscow, they would handle those because it's within their response area. So,
And you have to backfill those depending on how long someone's gonna be gone on an ambulance? Did I get it right?
yeah, we backfill them, yeah. If we send them, we backfill the crews. So we don't run short or have to take a rig out of service. So,
And your guys' pay for breakfast per diem, has that been evaluated in today's market?
No.
no,
But and
I
here's
was
the
looking
thing,
at that yesterday, I was
it's,
like,
it's, again,
I mean, McDonald's
It's-
is more expensive than you want it to be
we have
nowadays.
we have a medical control who's a little more demanding now at the emergency room of what needs to go right now. And so we're seeing it more than we had in the past, but this is something that we hadn't been doing for so long that we really haven't put a lot of emphasis on.
So does that not feel like it needs to be reevaluated today?
About that.
Yeah,
We're just gonna talk about what's on. the
That would,
table.
Never mind.
yeah, that would be something that we talk about in
In
negotiations.
negotiations.
All right. Article 31, social security replacement. Do you guys have questions about what that is? So there's a 6.2% FICA that the city pays for its employees, the employee contributes. Instead of social security, that 6.2% match goes into either or goes into a Percy Choice 401k. For a reservist, it goes into a nationwide 401a.
yeah, there's a lot of history. So back in 1980-ish, when we went to the Percy, and it used to be the firefighter retirement fund, FRF. Yeah, so when we went into Percy, the state retirement plan, we were supposed to be offered the ability to opt out of Social Security. And apparently that election never happened. And then a decade or more went by, and some firefighters that are much smarter than I am figured this all out and said we need to have the ability to opt out of Social Security. And then, so 10 years ago or more,
I wanna say 2006 maybe.
okay, the firefighters in the state opted out of Social Security, and part of that is that we, instead of paying Social Security, we pay into our 401k, and the city matches our 401k as a replacement for Social Security.
I guess a big part of that too is so we didn't have our new firefighters going, oh, we're just gonna be able to take that money, and it was kind of protection for them.
Right.
You need to save for retirement, and that's where this was going, so let's divert it.
Yeah, 100%.
And, so.
Any other questions about social security replacement? Okay, we're almost there. Article 32, city budget information. Pretty easy. Article 33, residency requirement. So, they're encouraged to live within the city limits, but if they reside without, they need to be within 30 minutes of the city limits. Reserve firefighters. Does anybody have any questions about Article 34 on reserve firefighters?
So in here it says, so their total career as a reserve, they're only required to have 6 hours of training?
No, I believe it's 6 hours. Is it 6 hours a
Monthly.
month, G?
Yes.
So.
Oh, every 30 days, or 12 hours within 60 days.
And a lot of times they accomplish that while they're on duty. You know, so if they're unable to get the training they need because they have their other jobs or working or whatever. So if we do training on a day and they miss that day, they're given the opportunity to come in and train. But a lot of reserves, most reserves get the training that we get 6 times a month because they end up working all the shifts. So, but that's.
So that's repetitive training.
Yes.
Yeah. So they're required to have 6 every 30 days, or
Yes.
whatever.
Mhm, yes.
Okay.
I can see
That kind
what,
of
Yeah,
goes back
that's
to
like, that's not much.
what you're talking
Shoot,
about.
I can do that.
Right. Go to where we had some of those reserves that just don't work. And we just need to make sure that they come in and do their training to make sure that they're on it. But again, most of our reserves work a preponderance more, so.
I can see how you read that though, because it doesn't say every 30 days or 12 weeks, it says
Where is that?
within. It's section 3, required training right here.
Oh,
So if they don't need that required training, do they then fall off like our reserved call list?
I would believe that would just fall underneath the chief's discretion, call them in and say, hey, you need to do your job.
Then we have to talk with them.
Okay.
You know, and if that becomes repetitive, then it escalates.
Yeah,
That
that's
would
good.
fall under the disciplinary
Yeah,
procedures.
with this language.
So then, do they ever evolve above what you call it, the tailboard and ambulance assistant?
No, so there's 4 positions in, sorry, there's more than that now. There's like 6 positions that they can work. And that's the tailboard positions, and so it's the very basic firefighter. We don't train them to the point of being able to drive fire apparatus or pump or do that kind of thing. Just specifically because those are more supervisory jobs. And we would be, it's very, I don't wanna speak out of turn with the chief, but it's difficult keeping the reserves trained to the tailboard level as it is. If we were to add training to work and driver operate, to be able to pump the fire apparatus, to be able to learn all the SOPs for the ambulances, that would be a big accomplishment for the reserves, just working as a part-time person.
Yeah, because they can work any of those spots too, so we're like a full-time guy that has a bid spot, that's his job, he goes to, let's say, engine 71 every day, and that's where he works. If a vacancy is created and we fill that position with like the lowest cost personnel, which is a reserve, they could work any of the spots. So they may be a medic 1 day, engine 1 day, medic 2 one day. So that's another part of it, to have them consistently be on the same vehicle so they can learn the ins and outs of it. And then actually, once we have a test, full-time test, and they get hired as a firefighter, not until they can move up into an engineer's role like we talked earlier, but they technically won't be assigned a driver operator, pump operator spot, engineer spot until they promote to that level. So it's checks and balances within the system.
So it's just a whole nother layer of training.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions on reserve firefighters? Okay, Article 35, physical fitness. Any questions on that? Some of those fitness tests are pretty intense, 50 pound,
Yeah.
wear a 50 pound thing.
Yeah, the older I get, the harder I get.
Yeah. Article 36, alcohol substance abuse policy.
I would assume that this is the same, with any kind of CDL requirement, like a DUI, would probably get taken away. I don't know if there's like a 1 or 2.
Yeah, the fire engine trucks are not required, they're not CDL required. So they don't have a CDL component, but this is just saying they recognize the administrative policy that was in effect at the time that the contract was signed. That administrative policy, it doesn't exist anymore. So probably something that would be discussed in negotiations.
And a driver's license is required for work.
Yeah.
So if
It's
you
part of
lose
the
your
job
driver's license,
description.
you better have some vacation or a way to spend the 90 days, or maybe just don't do things.
If they have like a DUI though, does that make it so they can no longer drive?
It
Yeah.
just depends on the,
I don't know if it's in the
Infraction.
contract, but, oh,
yeah.
As long as they're able to maintain their driver's license currently, that's where we're at. If we had an individual, which I've never had in my time, have multiple DUIs, then that was something we certainly worked through in the disciplinary process and with our attorney.
Yeah, I think all the job descriptions require a valid driver's license, but it kind of depends on, some people get a DUI, but then it's lowered to a different,
Or they're given
or they're given
a
a,
work license, basically,
work
they
license.
can drive at work,
Yeah.
they can't drive outside of work. And that's not just specific to firemen, that's,
right.
but so that's definitely another avenue, but
they could
yeah,
get
it's condition of employment.
We try to handle those things internally in our organization because we're professional firefighters and we have a brand.
Yeah,
You don't want that silly.
right, that would make sense. Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions? We've got Article saving clause. And then Article 38, term of agreement. Are there any other questions about the? Great.
Good question. Thanks for including us. It's very nice to have a collaborative effort on this.
Thank you for
All right, thank you.
walking through it.
Yeah, appreciate it, thank you.
Yeah, if you wanna do the safety minutes, see what I do. Yeah, no, yeah.
Stay with us for the rest of it, it's pretty exciting. After this, thank you everyone for your participation. Next up, we have item B, United Airlines minimum revenue guarantee, receiving an update regarding negotiations of a minimum revenue guarantee agreement with United Airlines for the 2024 fiscal year, discussion regarding the same item. So what I will do is provide you with an update as I know it to be. As of 3:44, Monday, January 29th. The update is that I have no update regarding the city's red line / question of the airport's inquiry to the FAA about this structure. That is a direct contract between the city and United. We, and when I say we, it's our city legal team, feel confident in having a contract directly with United Airlines that we're allowed to do that. However, it appears that the Lewiston Airport does not have the FAA's blessing at this time. At least we don't have an agreement to consider today. So I've been advised that the council should wait until we have this contract back from the Lewiston Airport, and they're working with their legal team, they're working with their consultant, and presumably the consultant is working with United and possibly the FAA to look over the arrangement that we have proposed. We have submitted some red line contracts to them. When I say them, that's everybody but FAA, to review and consider. There are things that we need in every contract at a minimum, and then there are things that are in that current version of that contract, that agreement, that we'd like changed, if at all possible. And again, we do not have confirmation from them, and I just want to give you a quick timeline here. So that was as of today, Monday, January 29th, 2024 at 1:49. That we have not heard back from them. The last time we visited, at least that I was involved with this, was Friday, January 26th at 3 p.m. Prior to that, Thursday, January 25th at 1:03 p.m. and many numerous other times, telephone calls, text messages, and things like that. So we are in a holding pattern, no pun intended. But until we hear back from our friends at the airport, I don't have an agreement for your consideration today. So with that, I would just like to see if Jennifer or Kayla has anything to add to the discussion to clarify, maybe that I missed
I don't think
or
so.
misstated.
That's it.
Counselors, if you have questions, please, I will try to answer them, or maybe you've had conversations with some of these individuals you can share with the rest of the council.
I don't know if we need this. Do we know who set that in? Because I know they talked about a timeline that we needed to kind of get this actioned. Do you know who set that? Was it United that said that, or was it?
I don't know who said that, but I know that the airport director asked us to have something in place by the end of January.
Okay. Thank you. Did we wait? Oh, not a lot to go on.
Yeah, that's the best I can do for you today, and I apologize. We just learned of this again at 1:49 this afternoon. So, that said, item C, resolution 2024-1, we will pull that. We will not consider that today because we don't have it. We don't have the agreement which was included with the resolution, included with this package. Yeah, in fact, the last page there, Exhibit A, says it'll be supplied once it's been received, and we do not have that yet. I don't know where it remains at. We don't have it yet, Elaine. So there's nothing to consider on that. Again, any questions, counselors?
I'm gonna give it a little bit tomorrow and then try to make another phone call again, or?
Well, we are in constant contact with them, so I know that Kayla and Jennifer have been working closely with Thad, their attorney for the airport. The airport director I have spoken with, I've spoken to some of the airport board members on this frequently. They are working with Garrett Foss of ArcStar, the airport's consultant. And we're just trying to get an agreement, get a final agreement put in place. So I don't think that's anything that we should look at as a bad thing, we just don't have it. So I don't know why it takes so long. They have to work with others, such as the FAA to make sure that everything is skookum, so. That's an Idaho word, Elaine, skookum.
Comes from Skookum Chuck.
It's also a nice beach, yeah.
So, contract comes tomorrow, we would call a special meeting, or what's the plan?
That's what the plan would be. If it shows up in the mailbox tomorrow, then we can give a 24-hour notice and have a meeting, another meeting.
So we have to give the 24 hours.
Tanya, we're gonna need a Zoom.
Can we just give a daily 24-hour meeting and?
No. I'm sure they're just as, they've been working on this as hard as we have, I should say that, yeah. There's been a lot of phone calls and emails trying to get this wrapped up.
Well, I would like to say that I do appreciate legal working as hard as they did and making sure that we are legal. That is first and foremost.
It is.
Well, I'm not an attorney, but I think it's legal. That's what my attorneys tell me, so I just take their word. No, Kayla has reached out to another law firm to ask for additional input, and it confirms what Jennifer and Kayla have been telling us, so.
It's always good to do.
Okay, counselors, that brings us to Roman numeral 5, adjournment.
So moved. So moved.
It's been moved by Counselor Clayburgh,
Second.
seconded by Counselor Schroeder to adjourn. Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.
Do we have any more time?